الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with what's mentioned about Prophet Dawood and Suleiman in Surah Sad. In Surah Sad, and mainly what the intention of this is to go through the hikam wal fawaid, the benefits mentioned specifically in tafsir of Imam al-Sa'di rahimahullah after he made the tafsir of that story from verse number 17 to verse number 40. So going through the tafsir of the verses very briefly because we want to get to the benefits. And it's a way for us to see how the benefits of the Quran never ceases, and it's not only what he mentioned, it's even more than that, because this is what the purpose of the Quran is, for us to act and not just to read and to benefit from the recitation, but the recitation and memorization and learning, understanding the Quran, so that it would have an effect on our speech and actions and mainly our hearts. So yesterday we stopped at where the sajda, when Dawood alayhi salam, he made sujood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and made istighfar. And it was said because that the judgment that he made, according to some, which is not clearly stated in the Quran, what he exactly made istighfar from, but it was said because he made the judgment without listening to the other side, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And there is Israeliyat and stories that is not appropriate and it's not authentic and it's fabricated where they attribute to Dawood alayhi salam evil actions, which is someone that is not even righteous would distance himself from such attributes. So how can that be to someone that is a prophet of Allah? And to add to this, one of the great messengers of Allah that was devoted in ibadah and worship, and claiming all kinds of false things that has no basis to it. So a person should stay away from these evil things. And this is also the effect of the matters of belief. We believe in all the prophets of Allah to be the best people ever walked on the face of earth, and that yes, are of different levels, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected them and chose them to be the example for mankind. So then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَغَفَرْنَا لَهُ ذَلِكَ وَإِنَّ لَهُ عِنْدَنَا لَزُلْفَى وَحُسْنَ مَآبٍ. We forgave him for what he did. And what he did, as Ibn Kathir and others, they said, is like when the Prophet ﷺ would choose from two choices. The sins to the prophets is when two choices are permissible, and he would choose, for example, the less preferred opinion, because there's no wahy revelation from Allah, then the wahy afterwards corrects him. So this is not a sin in the sense that he disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willingly, knowingly, things like this. So whatever that was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave him. وَإِنَّ لَهُ عِنْدَنَا لَزُلْفَى وَحُسْنَ مَآبٍ. And for him, meaning Dawood alayhi salam, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, عِنْدَنَا لَزُلْفَى. Zulfa is al-qurba, is that he is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, someone that has high level of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and righteousness. Wa husna ma'ab, and the best return. So the subject of the return is mentioned a lot in the verses. Awwab, that means he's always returning to Allah, so therefore he has the best return when he returns to Allah. Whoever returns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life constantly, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator, the owner of all things, returning to Allah with matters of understanding and knowledge, when we learn what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, returning to Allah with repentance and seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the people that would have the best return when they return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala physically. And on the other hand, those who do not return to Allah, there is no return to Allah in their life, they don't follow the commands of Allah, they don't repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would have the worst return when they physically return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Imam Sa'di in the Quran teaches us this adab and this manners. In this he said, this dhanb, or this sin that was done by Dawood alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not mention it because there's no need for it. So فَالتَّعَرُّضْ لَهُمْ مِنْ بَابِ التَّكَلُّفِ. Whoever wants to know and ask and look at other books, what was the sin that is mentioned in the verses, this is from the takalluf. And the takalluf is to go out of your way to do something that is not necessary or being nosy, being whatever you can call the word. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly stated that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, commanding him to say, وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُتَكَلِّفِينَ. I'm not from the mutakallifin. I'm not from those who would impose something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want from us. So follow the way also of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. If there was benefit, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have mentioned it. And what's mentioned is how Dawood alayhi salam was in that high status and level to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's what is supposed to be mentioned. And he says, وَإِنَّمَا الْفَائِدَةُ مَا قَصَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا مِنْ لُطْفِهِ بِهِ وَتَوْبَتِهِ وَإِنَابَتِهِ. The benefit is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, that Allah bestowed His mercy upon him and accepted his repentance and his return. And as a result of that, he was elevated in one of the highest levels. So after the tawbah, he was in a better state than he was before the tawbah. And this is always one of the great benefits to learn, that the tawbah, when a person repents to Allah, he's supposed to be better after the tawbah than he was even before the sin was committed. And that's if there's a real sin. So if someone committed a sin, even if it's a major sin, small sin, whatever it is, he was righteous, he was upon the deen of Allah, then he fell into a sin. Then he repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from that sin. As a sign that the tawbah is a sincere one, is to return not to the way he was before the sin, no, to a better state than he was before the sin. To increase his good deeds, to increase his steadfastness. And this is the sign that the tawbah is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the best return, وَحُسْنَ مَآبٍ, whether it's the physical one in the Day of Judgment, but also the best return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with perfect repentance. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يا داود إنا جعلناك خليفة في الأرض فاحكم بين الناس بالحق ولا تتبع الهوى فيضلك عن سبيل الله إن الذين يضلون عن سبيل الله لهم عذاب شديد بما نسوا يوم الحساب. O Dawood, verily, we have placed you as a successor on earth. So judge you between men in truth and justice, and follow not your desire, for it will mislead you from the path of Allah. Verily, those who wander astray from the path of Allah shall have a severe torment, because they forgot the day of reckoning. And that's why some said that was supposed to be considered a sin, is because of that judgment that he made between the two people. Because right after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Dawood, and he was, alayhi salam, to be just and to judge people with justice. Ya Dawood, inna ja'alnaka, we made you khalifatan fil ard. Al khalifa is the successor. And by the word khalifa doesn't have to be one form of authority, as many of even the Muslims they think. There is khilafa rashida, and there's always khilafa. Even if a ruler is on a specific country, he is in the position of the khalifa, even if he doesn't call himself a khalifa. So the khalifa is not a holy position necessarily. There is the khulafa al-rashidun, they were rightly guided khalifa. But the word khalifa is successor. Nobody becomes a king or a ruler from nowhere. He has to come, from a previous one. So this is what is meant by the khalifa. So if there is multiple rulers, the same rulings that applies to the rulers applies, or the khalifa applies to them. So, and this is also something that I guess the Muslims, they passed it on to others, where they think the word khalifa or the khilafa has a holiness to it. No, it's basically the rule, and of course to rule by the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whether a person is called a king, called a president, or be called whatever, if he rules by the deen of Allah, then he is righteous. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Dawood alayhi salam khalifatan fil ard, and of course the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at the end of time it will be khilafatun rashida ala minhaj al-nubuwwah, it would return to be khilafa rashida, rightly guided one according to the way of the prophethood. So we made you khalifatan fil ard, and to be a ruler or to be a person of authority, this is only given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not as also some deviants would think that this is given by Allah to the ruler, that he would say, I received the command from Allah to rule you. There's no such a thing. This is the Prophet's wahi. But meaning, as the qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if someone rules, this is by the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, as it says, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of all things, the one that has the sovereignty of all kingdoms. He, the king of all kings, he gives the kingdom to whoever he wills, and he takes it away from whoever he wills. So not just Dawood alayhi salam, also the wicked, if there's a wicked ruler, it's given to him by Allah. It's because he's righteous? No. It's just a matter of, this is what human beings are tested, and there are ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that never fails. So as a result of you being successor, a khalifa in the earth, فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ بِالْحَقِّ, judge among people with al-haqq, with the truth, which is justice. And as for a fact, what is the haqq? The haqq can never be attained, or justice as a rule can never be attained unless a person has the proper knowledge and the understanding of the reality of things, and the proper knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and know the reality of how he's going to judge between two people if he doesn't know their case. And Dawood alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him this ability. وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْهَوَى, and do not follow your desire, so that you would favor someone because of a relationship. And favoring someone doesn't have to be that you favor him for some worldly gain. It can be a person can judge between two people, and he favors someone thinking that this is what is best for their religion. It's still forbidden. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah An-Nisa about if you favor the poor over the rich, because the one is poor and one is rich. So, and the rich, like the case of 99 and 1, right? What is one is going to do for the rich? So you would favor the poor. No, judge with what is just, even if it's against the poor. And then take care of the poor. This is a separate thing. And this is in the judgment, different than a sulh or bringing people to be at ease with one another. وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْهَوَى. So the opposite of al-haqq, the opposite of the truth, is following the desire. فَيُضِلَّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. If you follow the desire, that would lead you astray from the path of Allah. And if Dawood alayhi salam is addressed by this, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised them in the previous verses, so how can that be then? What would be the case for those who are less than Dawood alayhi salam? And that's why it's a very serious matter, the issue of justice and judging among people. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُضِلُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ شَدِيدٌ بِمَا نَسُوا يَوْمَ الْحِسَابِ. Those who deviate away from the path of Allah, especially those who are intentionally doing so, as he says, they have a severe punishment because of what? They forgot the day of reckoning. That what led them to be in that state of injustice. Because if someone is always conscious of the day of judgment, they would have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that would take them away from the desire that would lead them astray. So this is also, as it's going to be mentioned, also from the benefits. If having the belief in the day of judgment and constantly remembering the day of judgment is one of the ways to protect oneself from being deviated. Because what's the value of this life? And why would a person deviate? For the benefit of this life, the worldly benefit. When a person thinks of the hereafter, he would have the fear of Allah, and to put that forward, not to follow one's desire, even if the judgment or the justice is against his own self or against his loved ones. The deen of Allah and the truth is the most important and the best concern that a person would have. Then some verses talks about general things. وَمَا خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاءَ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا بَاطِلًا ذَلِكَ ظَنُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَوَيْلُ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنَ النَّارِ. And we created not the heaven and the earth and all that is in between them without purpose. That is the consideration of those who disbelieve. Then woe to those who disbelieve from the fire. So denying what the disbelievers attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is falsehood. When people are upon falsehood and they say this is what is right, they attribute falsehood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The creation of the heavens and the earth and what's in between them, they are created bil-haqq, in truth and for the truth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that created everything, and He created them for a reason, not for nothing like this, as the disbelievers either claim or they act as if the creation of the heavens and the earth is for nothing. Look at their actions. Their actions is what? As if this life has no purpose, because they just follow their desires and there is no right or wrong, there is no obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth for people to worship Allah and to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ذلك ظن الذين كفروا. This is the thinking of the disbelievers when they attribute to Allah what does not befit the majesty and the power of Allah. Because basically they're attributing to Allah that there's no wisdom, that He's not the most wise subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَوَيْلُ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنَ النَّارِ. Woe to the disbelievers from the hellfire. And people should act upon the purpose of this life. Then the next ayah, أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ كَالْمُفْسِدِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الْمُتَّقِينَ كَالْفُجَّارِ. Shall we treat those who believe and do righteous good deeds as the mufsideen, as those who are spread corruption on the face of earth, or shall we treat the muttaqeen as the fujjar, the wicked ones? And the answer to it is very obvious and very clear. That means it would never be. So let those who are ignorant, they do not know the wisdom of Allah, let them think, let them know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise. He would not make equal in His judgment, in His ruling, between these two opposites. Those who believe and do righteous good deeds, they're not going to be the like or the same as those who كالمفسدين في الأرض, those who spread corruption on the face of earth. And that's what the dhann of the الذين كفروا, the disbelievers, when they disbelieved in the day of judgment, they're basically saying that it doesn't matter whether a person is a righteous person, a believer, righteous upon what is justice, versus the most wicked person on the face of earth. If there's no day of judgment, that means they're all the same. And what prevails is the power and the wealth, and injustice prevails and goes on without being returned back to matter of justice if there's no day of judgment, because things are not finished in this life. And this is a reality that nobody can deny. How many people they die being oppressed and being treated with injustice, and how many people they continue to live with all kinds of oppression and injustice, and nobody, no revenge, no justice is being served. So this life that we live in is full of injustices. And either the disbelievers would attribute to Allah that how can injustices be allowed, because they don't believe in the day of judgment. This life is a test, and people are left to do whatever they choose to do for a period of time, and then the justice will be served. So the same thing that how people, if they live in a country or in a place, if they say how come there's no justice, it will be true if there's no justice. But if people they commit crimes and then they brought to the justice and they're treated in a just way, then that means there is justice on the land. Right? So if there's rules of justice is being applied, people won't say there's no justice in this country or just like that. Why? Because there is justice is being applied. It doesn't mean that there won't be crimes committed. So if there's crimes of injustice committed on the face of earth, it doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wal-'iyadhu billah is not aware of it or let injustice be prevailing. No, it's just a matter of time. Why are you thinking only of the life that we live in? That's why the day of judgment, if there's no justice served in a particular matter in this life, it will be served perfectly in the day of judgment. And what's served in this life will be redone again in the day of judgment. So all of the matters of dispute will be brought back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of judgment. And that all goes together, how the disbelievers, they attribute wal-'iyadhu billah, foolishness and injustices to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why it's very obvious. أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Would we make those who believe in righteous good deeds like the mufsideen fil ard, like those who spread corruption on the face of earth? Hasha wa kalla. There is no way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make them the same and make them equal. Then a person would say, so then where is the day of judgment? This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, and how the matter is very clear. Also, what's the opposite of al-iman wal-amal al-salih? Al-ifsadu fil ard. So if people are not upon the proper iman and the proper righteous good deeds, they are corrupters on the face of earth. This is corruption. It doesn't have to be one form of corruption. As human beings, they think of corruption as one or two or three or some things to do with specific actions. No, al-kufr is corruption on the face of earth. Sins with all its levels are all corruption on the face of earth. أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الْمُتَّقِينَ كَالْفُجَّارِ. The people of taqwa, are they going to be the like as the fujjar, the wicked ones, those who rebel against the commands of Allah and they do sins and evil actions without even thinking of having any conscience of even returning away or repenting or hesitant in doing evil? So this is the ways of Allah, and it's stated clearly. كتاب أنزلناه إليك مبارك ليدبروا آياته وليتذكر أولو الألباب. This is a book, the Quran, which we have sent down to you, full of blessings, that they may ponder over its verses, and that men of understanding may remember. So the Quran is brought down, revealed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most high. إليك, to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Mubarak. Mubarak, that means it's blessed, and it's a noun here that means it's all blessed. There's no exception. The book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all blessed. That means has so much khair, so much goodness, and so much knowledge that, again, as we said, no one can even get all of what they desire to get from the Quran in this limited life, because it's a speech of Allah. So it has every guidance from every deviation. It has a cure to every disease. It has light, as he mentioned. I'm looking at what he's saying. Nur يستضاء به في الظلمات, light to be to know to live this life in the midst of darknesses. And وكل حكم, and every ruling that those who are responsible, the human beings, they are in need to save themselves from the hellfire and to be from among the people of Jannah. And the clear evidences, so there is no like of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's Mubarak لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ. This is the hikmah. And lam is the ta'leel. Why is that? For them to reflect, to ponder over the ayat of Allah. Why the Quran is revealed? For people to reflect and ponder over the ayat of Allah. So that they would, when you reflect, when you ponder over the ayat, you will extract from it. And this requires ilm, of course. And he says, فَيَسْتَخْرِجُ عِلْمَهَا وَيَتَأَمَّلُ أَسْرَارَهَا وَحِكَمِهَا وَحُكْمِهَا. They would extract from it the knowledge of it, and they would reflect upon the things that are not apparent. The Quran is not just the apparent meanings of things. There are treasures of meanings, but it requires ilm, not ignorance. As some people might go to the verses and, oh, this word is mentioned because of this or that. It requires ilm and foundation, and to understand the principles of the tafsir and how the Prophet ﷺ explained it, and the Sahaba and the Imam of the Deen. And then after having the foundation of this ilm, then these are the people, and through them is to learn and to reflect over even the wisdom behind things, and you go deeper and deeper in the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, and that's also a tadabbur, as he says, one of the meanings of it, and what he mentioned about the tadabbur by itself is ilm. وَإِعَادَةُ الْفِكْرِ فِيهَا مَرَّ بَعْدَ مَرَّ, to keep on thinking and reflecting upon it one time after another. It's not like, okay, I already reflected upon this verse, then move on to the next one for the rest of one's life. No, you keep on coming to the verses one after another, and reflecting upon it, and you would keep on extracting these treasures from it with matters of ilm, which, because it's a blessed book. And that's why it's one of the lessons learned here, that we need to make tadabbur of the Quran. We need to reflect and ponder over the meanings of the Quran with sincerity and devotion, that we want to be guided and we want to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And this tadabbur is وَأَنَّهُ مِنْ أَفْضَلِ الْأَعْمَالِ. One of the best of deeds is when people reflect upon the Quran. They learn and they want to understand, not just the tafsir. Tadabbur is something more than just to understand the meanings of the verses, to ponder, to reflect, so that the person would affect his actions. And that's why reciting the Quran while pondering is better than just to recite for the sake of rewards. وَلِيَتَذَكَّرْ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ, and for the people of sound minds and reason, for them to be reminded with every needed knowledge and everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them, so that they would benefit from it. And that is the purpose of the stories that are being mentioned, and it goes from one part of the story to the other, because it's not just about Dawood alayhi salam and what happened, it's about the benefits from it. Then after that, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praising Dawood alayhi salam, he mentioned Suleiman. وَوَهَبْنَا لِدَاوُودَ سُلَيْمَانَ نِعْمَ الْعَبْدُ إِنَّهُ أَوَّابٌ. And what we mentioned of these foundations and these principles, one of the problems that we have as human beings, we forget. So, for example, what we just mentioned in a few minutes, we have to carry that with us whenever we read anything that comes afterwards. And that's why, you go back and forth, so that we don't just fall into the trap that we forgot, and then we read the verses, and then so why is that? Why this is mentioned? in a sense that a person forget the foundations of things. Why would be injustice in whatever happened there? Didn't you hear the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most just? And that's why there is the day of judgment. So again, we have to carry these beliefs with us at all times so that it explains everything. So, وَوَهَبْنَا لِدَاوُودَ Suleiman. When you reflect upon the words, Dawood is given Suleiman by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And وَهَبْنَا, al-hiba is a gift. And the gift or al-hiba, it doesn't mean that a person deserves something. It's given to him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-wahhab. So it is not necessarily that a person deserves something, so he has the right to be given something. No, it's something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's al-wahhab, He's the bestower of all things. نعم العبد إنه أواب. Awab is mentioned again. Suleiman alayhi salam, نعم العبد, what a great servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Suleiman. So anything that, or any stories, made up stories or fabricated stories are mentioned in an evil way about Suleiman alayhi salam, we have نعم العبد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised him. What a great servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he was. إنه أواب, and he's praised by the fact that he is awab also, always returning to Allah. So we need to reflect upon this al-awbah, wal-inaba, and so on. Awab, and that's, I guess, one of the objectives of the surah, to learn this, to reflect upon this. And again, so what is awab? Rajja', return, he always returned to Allah. A returner to Allah, always, constantly, in all of his affairs. And that because awab is not that he returned one time. The norm is when someone live, or not the norm, but a person living his life doing whatever he wants, making decisions, getting jobs, leaving jobs, making salah, making relationships, all kinds of decisions, and not returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with all of these decisions. And then once in a while, he wants to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from him. If he feels maybe something, or some feeling comes into his heart, or repenting once in a while, this is not what awab means. Awab is sighat mubalagha, that means he's always returning to Allah. So whether it's materialistic things, matters of ibadah, learning the deen, relationships, children, families, co-workers, always returning to Allah to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And that is by worshipping Him, by the inaba, by the mahabba, with dhikr, with dua, always returning to Allah with these acts of worship, and with repenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and that requires again lots of reflection to be constantly in that state of return. Then the incident also, as mentioned with Dawood alayhi salam, another incident here with Suleiman. Suleiman alayhi salam, even the fairy tales are far more mentioned in the books and in the Israeliyat, and also the Quran refers to something here but without details. But here, إِذْ عُرِضَ عَلَيْهِ بِالْعَشِيِّ الصَّافِنَاتُ الْجَادِّ. This is a specific incident when presented to Sulaiman alayhi salam bil-ashi, in the afternoon, الصَّافِنَاتُ الْجِيَادِ, well-trained horses of the highest breed. And he had these horses, and they were for the jihad fi sabilillah, for the purpose of the deen, not for because he liked horses or just luxuriously, just because he liked horses. The believers and the messengers of Allah, of course, everything has a great purpose that is always returning to Allah. So when these horses were presented to him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned them how as-safinat al-jiyad. So as-safinat is one of the good characteristics of the horses when it stand on, as they say, on 3 foot and lift one of them as a way to show its strength. Al-jiyad, that means they run so fast. And horses till today, it's another lifestyle, right? So this was presented to him, the best of horses, and he, especially those who have kingdom and things like this, this is one of the most important wealth that they have for the benefits of the horses at the times. فقال إني أحببت حب الخير عن ذكر ربي حتى توارت بالحجاب. He said, إني أحببت. I did love the good, which referring to these horses, instead of remembering my Lord, till the time was over and the sun had hidden in the veil of the night. When the horses was presented to him, so the verse is basically saying that the sun had set, and it was said that he forgot the salah or delayed the salah, So he regret what he did, and he says, أحببت حب الخير. I loved the khair, the materialistic things that he was presented to him, عن ذكر ربي, away from the dhikr of Allah. The love or the different actions that a person would have in this life, it is not condemned in itself, but if it takes the person away from the rights of his life or from the worship of Allah, then this is what is condemned. That's why it says, he did not say, I love the horses. That's fine. You can love horses, you can like whatever you want to do, but عن ذكر ربي, that it took him away from the dhikr of Allah, then what is good becomes evil. Not that it's evil in itself, it's how the person treated it and how a person perceived it. So it was said to be Salatul Asr or something like this because of the sun. حتى توارت بالحجاب, till the sun was set. And this was mentioned by some of the early generations of Islam and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and many stories with regards to this and how the messengers of Allah were upon. ردوها علي, he said to the people, return it back to me, meaning these horses. فطفق مسحا بالسوق والأعناق. فطفق مسحا بالسوق والأعناق, it means then he began to pass his hand over their legs and their necks. And the ulama in the tafsir, they have two opinions there. فطفق, he kept on doing طفق, that means he kept on doing things over and over again. مسحا بالسوق, المسح, wiping. So either he physically wiped these horses, their legs and their necks, because it doesn't have any fault whatsoever. It's his fault that the time passed and he did not make the salah, for example. And some said مسحا بالسوق والأعناق, that means he killed them all in these two places. He hid the horses with his sword. And those who said, how can a prophet of Allah do that? Is he punishing the horses when the horses has no fault whatsoever? Allah knows best what is more correct. And Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he says about يعقرها. But one of the things is also, it's not waste, and that comes the ruling of, is it permissible to eat the meat of the horses or not? It is permissible, right? So it's not haram meat or anything. It's best to avoid it because it's used for a great purpose, but it's something to be. So either way, he did not waste anything, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. ردوا عليه فطفق مسحا بالسوق والأعناق. The next set of verses talks about what happened to Suleiman. وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّ سُلَيْمَانَ وَأَلْقَيْنَا عَلَى كُرْسِيِّهِ جَسَدًا ثُمَّ أَنَابَ. We'll do that inshallah ta'ala tomorrow. And indeed we did try Suleiman. Suleiman alayhi salam was tested, and we placed on his throne وَأَلْقَيْنَا عَلَى كُرْسِيِّهِ جَسَدًا, a physical body. ثُمَّ أَنَابَ, then he returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or returned to his kingdom again. And this is a huge thing of what exactly happened. But وَأَلْقَيْنَا عَلَى كُرْسِيِّهِ, he has a kursi, he has a throne. We'll do that inshallah ta'ala tomorrow. And he had, and in his kingdom, the amazing things that no like of it whatsoever was given to anyone afterwards, with Dawood and Suleiman alayhi salam. So it was said there was a shaitan, and there is the ring of Suleiman, and all these types of things that the Quran doesn't mention it. And really, when you read it in the books of tafsir, is of no benefit. But something happened that he lost his power for some time, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him return back to his power. All the details there's no benefit in knowing it, right? But there's no sinful acts or anything like this, or people were deceived. They thought that this shaitan was Suleiman, and he started giving rulings that is strange. And Suleiman alayhi salam, as they say, will start wandering in the land because the ring that he always leave, this shaitan deceived, and he took the ring and he put it on and he became the king, like the fairy tale style of things. So the ayah says Allah tried Suleiman, and he put a body on his kursi, on his throne, ثم أناب, and then the matter was returned back to Suleiman. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala because of the time tomorrow. And again, we're not reflecting and pondering over the verses the way it ought to be, but because we want to go to the benefits, and that these benefits will kind of teaches us how to to humble ourselves to the message of the Quran, and not necessarily to be able, each and every one of us without knowledge, to extract benefits, but to see how we need to humble ourselves to learn from the Quran, to act upon it, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum.